Before we begin, if you enjoy slow burn horror with cursed secrets and uneasy endings, hit like and subscribe to WHISPERLOOP. Tonight's story is about a young monk who wanders too close to a stilt house behind a cemetery and meets a man in white who promises one thing: revenge has a price. Keep your lights low. Keep your headphones on. The first time Arun saw the stilt house behind the cremation pavilion, the sun was already lifting itself out of the trees like a slow, tired fire. He was still a monk then, newly ordained, head shaved smooth, robe the color of burnt saffron. Every morning he walked barefoot from the temple gate with an alms bowl pressed to his ribs, eyes lowered like he had been taught. The village placed rice and fruit into his bowl, murmuring blessings. He nodded, said nothing, and kept moving. Behind the temple, the land dipped into a cemetery made of concrete compartments stacked like drawers, each with a name, a photo, and a date. The dead watched you from those little windows while you walked. And behind that, half hidden by banana leaves and tall grass, stood the stilt house. It looked exactly like the kind of place people in Thailand whisper about without ever pointing. The bottom level was open, just beams and posts and shadow, while the living space sat above, reached by a narrow staircase. Beneath the floorboards, rows of plastic chairs faced inward, as if arranged for a meeting that never ended. They were full of people, men with sunburned necks, women clutching handbags like shields, a boy with a bandage over one eye, a pregnant woman holding her belly with both hands. They sat in silence, waiting, their faces turned toward the staircase. Arun slowed without meaning to. A young man in a plain white shirt noticed him and stood. "You're from the temple," he said, polite but wary. Arun's eyes flicked up. "What is this place?" The young man glanced toward the cemetery as if the dead were listening. "Ajahn Thay's house." "Ajahn," Arun repeated. "A master, a teacher, a spirit doctor." The young man's voice dropped. "People come here for answers, to undo things, or to do them." Arun felt his stomach tighten. The temple elders warned novices about places like this, shrines that mixed prayer with hunger, monks who sold blessings, masters who took payment in something that wasn't money. Yet the chairs were full, from dawn to dusk. Arun continued his route, but the stilt house stayed in his mind like a splinter. That night the temple was quiet. The older monks had returned to their quarters. The novices slept in their thin mats. Arun lay awake in his little thatched hut, listening to insects scratch at the dark. The cremation pavilion's roof creaked faintly, and somewhere in the cemetery a dog barked once, then stopped as if something had stared it down. He told himself it was none of his business, but curiosity is a soft knife. You don't feel it cut until you're already bleeding. The next evening, after he finished his chores, Arun changed out of his robe into a plain shirt and trousers. He wrapped a scarf around his head, more to hide his shaved scalp than to keep warm. When the sky began to bruise purple, he left the temple grounds and walked past the cemetery to the stilt house. It was busier than before. Under the house, candles burned near two large clay jars. The candlelight didn't brighten anything, it just made shadows sharper. A smell hung in the air: wax, herbs, old smoke, and something faintly sour. Arun hovered near the chairs, pretending to be another villager waiting his turn. No one looked closely. At dusk, everyone hides something. A hand landed on his shoulder. Arun flinched, spinning. The young man from earlier stood beside him, expression unreadable. "Ajahn Thay wants you upstairs," he said. Arun's throat went dry. "Me? Yes. I'm not." The young man didn't argue. He simply nodded toward the staircase. Arun climbed. With each step, the air changed. It grew heavier, not with heat but with attention, like entering a room where people have been whispering their name. At the top, he stepped into a wide living room lit by oil lamps. Two neat rows of people sat on the floor, facing inward, forming a path down the center. Their eyes slid to Arun and away again, avoiding him as if he carried a contagion. At the far end of the room sat a man dressed entirely in white. He wasn't old, but he moved like someone who had already lived several lives. His hair was cropped close. His face was smooth and calm, almost kind, except for the eyes. Those eyes were not curious, they were certain. In front of him knelt a woman, trembling. The man in white spoke softly, and the room leaned in to hear him. This is holy water, he said, gesturing to a small bottle beside him. Take it home. Drink it for 7 days. You will improve. The woman pressed her forehead to the floor, hands together. Her relatives bowed. One by one, the room emptied down the staircase. Soon only 3 people remained: Ajahn, Arun, and the young man who had guided him up. In the sudden quiet, Arun noticed what stood behind Ajahn, a massive altar that filled the back wall. There were Buddha images, yes, but also things the temple would never keep. Carved wooden masks with frozen smiles, little dolls made of clay, bundles of cords and beads, brass bowls stained dark, jars of different sizes, some sealed with wax, some wrapped in cloth, a line of small bottles that caught the lamplight like black teeth, and in the center, a low platform with a cloth folded over something lumpy. Ajahn watched Arun take it in, then spoke as if continuing a conversation Arun didn't remember starting. "Monk," he said. Arun's heart slammed. He forced his voice steady. "I'm not." Ajahn lifted a hand. "Don't waste breath." "You are." Arun's scarf suddenly felt too thin to hide anything. "How do you know?" Ajahn tilted his head, listening to something that wasn't in the room. "Because what I keep here called me. My guardians, my hungry ones." Arun's mouth went cold. "I came because I was curious," he said quickly. "I saw people waiting. I wanted to know what this place was." Ajahn lips curved, not into a smile but into amusement. "This is my ground," he said. "I remove curses. I heal those who are bound. I read paths. I twist luck. I tie hearts together. I untie them too." Arun stared at him. "That's not a temple." Ajahn leaned forward slightly. "No, it's work." The young man at the side kept his eyes down, like a servant used to storms. Ajahn continued, gentle as water. "Sometimes people come to be freed. Sometimes they come to be armed." Arun swallowed. "I don't want any of that." "You think you don't." Ajahn voice softened. "But you will. You'll come back here with a need so sharp, it will make your hands shake." Arun's scalp prickled beneath his scarf. "No." Ajahn gaze pinned him. "You don't have to believe me. Just remember, when the world takes something from you, the temple will tell you to accept it. I will tell you how to take something back." Arun backed away as if the floor had turned hot. "I should go." Ajahn waved lazily, like dismissing a fly. "Go. You're not ready." Arun hurried down the stairs, out into the candlelit underside of the house, past the waiting chairs. He kept walking until the temple walls rose in front of him like safety. That night, he did his prayers with his hands trembling. 3 months later, Arun left the monkhood. In Thailand, short ordination was common. Young men entered the robe to honor their parents, to make merit, to be considered fully grown. Arun's family was poor but proud. His mother cried when she saw him shave his head. His father barely looked up from his cup. Arun returned home and did what he was supposed to do: work. They lived in a small house beside rice fields. His mother carried the weight of everything like a habit. His father carried a bottle like it was the only thing he trusted. And nearby lived his uncle, his father's older brother, who came and went as if the world owed him space. Arun's father drank with that uncle often. They sat under a fan that barely worked and laughed loud enough to cover their own emptiness. When Arun was away at the temple, he worried about his mother, but she always told him, "I'm fine. Make merit. Don't think too much." After he returned, he saw the truth clearer than before. She wasn't fine. She was exhausted. Then she got sick. At first it was a fever, then coughing, then weakness that made her sit down in the middle of sweeping, staring at the broom as if it belonged to someone else. Arun took her to the clinic. The doctor gave medicine and advice they couldn't afford to follow. Arun took her to another doctor, then another. Nothing helped. His father contributed nothing except complaints. Some nights Arun heard shouting. Once he saw bruises on his mother's arm and felt his vision darken with rage. She told him it was nothing, like she always did, like protecting Arun from truth was her last job. 2 weeks into her sickness, the fever spiked so high she couldn't speak. That morning Arun told his father, very carefully, "Stay here. Don't go drinking. Watch her. If she worsens, take her to the clinic. I have to go sell the rice. If I don't, we won't have money for medicine." His father grunted without looking at him. Arun left with a tight knot in his chest, as if the air itself didn't trust him to go. By the time he returned, the house was silent. His mother lay in the bedroom, eyes open, staring at the ceiling as if she'd been surprised by death and didn't know how to close the door behind her. Arun stumbled forward. He touched her cheek. It was already cooling. Something was wrong. Not just grief wrong, not just fate wrong. There was a mark at the edge of her ear, small, torn, like a bite or a rough pull. And her eyes looked angry, as if she'd left with unfinished words. Arun ran outside, shouting for his father. He searched the fields, the neighbors, the road. Nothing. Only one place made sense. He sprinted to his uncle's house. There, on the floor, his father and his uncle lay in a heap of drunken limbs. The smell of rice liquor was thick enough to choke. Arun shook his father, screamed his name, punched his shoulder until the older man's eyes fluttered open in annoyance. "Mother is dead," Arun said, voice breaking. His father blinked slowly, then shrugged with a cruelty so casual it felt unreal. "People die," he muttered. "What do you want me to do?" Arun's hands shook. "If you had stayed, if you had taken her." His father rolled onto his side, like Arun was background noise. "Stop whining." Arun stared at him, and something inside Arun cracked so cleanly he almost heard it. The funeral was small. Monks came to chant. Neighbors brought food. Arun sat beside the coffin with his jaw clenched until it ached. Before the cremation, the monks opened the coffin so the family could see her one last time. Arun leaned in, whispering, "Close your eyes, please." But her eyes stayed open. They tried gently pressing the lids down. They tried prayers. They tried advice from old women, or said certain words, certain gestures. Nothing worked. His mother went into the fire with her eyes open. That image stuck in Arun's mind like a hook. After the cremation, the house felt hollow. His father drank. His uncle visited more often, strolling in and out with the confidence of someone who'd never been held accountable for anything. Then, one evening, Arun walked home from the fields as the sky darkened. He heard footsteps behind him. He turned, and something smashed into the back of his head. Pain flashed white. The world tilted. He tasted blood. He fell. When he woke, his skull throbbed and his mouth was dry. He lifted a hand and felt a bandage. Someone had cleaned him. Someone had wrapped him. He tried to sit up. He froze. He was naked. So was his uncle, lying nearby, snoring lightly as if he'd taken a nap after work. Arun's stomach turned to ice. He stumbled backward, shaking, rage and shame boiling together until he couldn't breathe. He grabbed his clothes from the floor and pulled them on with clumsy hands. He shook his uncle hard. "Wake up." The older man groaned, opened his eyes, and smirked as if he'd been caught stealing fruit. "What did you do?" Arun hissed. His uncle stretched like a cat. "You were unconscious," he said lazily. "I tried to wake you. You didn't wake, and I was drunk." His tone made it sound like weather, an accident, inevitable, not worth discussing. Arun lunged at him, but his uncle moved faster than expected, grabbing a machete from beside the bed and raising it with a calm threat. "You go home," his uncle said, voice turning low, "and you don't tell stories, or you'll end up like your mother." Arun's breath hitched. "You." His uncle's eyes were flat. "Go." Arun ran. He went straight to his father, still shaking. He told him everything, his cracked skull, the humiliation, the threat. His father listened with the same emptiness he used when listening to thunder. Then he said, "That's your problem." Arun stared. "He hurt me. I'm not getting involved." It was in that moment Arun realized he had no family left, not in any way that mattered. He sat outside alone until the sky went fully black. Insects sang like a crowd at a funeral. The air was thick with heat and rot, and the memory of his mother's open eyes. And then, without meaning to, Arun remembered a house behind a cemetery, a man in white, a voice saying, "When the world takes something from you, the temple will tell you to accept it. I will tell you how to take something back." Arun walked to a Jarnte's stilt house, like someone walking into his own sentence. When he arrived, the same young man in a white shirt stood at the bottom of the stairs, as if he'd been waiting for hours. He didn't look surprised. "Ajarn said you'd come," the young man said. "Go up." Arun climbed. Ajarn Thay sat in the same place, white clothes glowing in lamplight. He looked at Arun's bandaged head and nodded. "I told you," Ajarn said you'd come. "Go up." Arun's hands dug into his palms. He would say something out loud. "I'm not here to learn." Ajarn Thay's eyes glittered. "Then why are you here?" Arun's voice shook, but not with fear. I want someone punished. Who? Arun swallowed the taste of humiliation and grief. My uncle. Ajahn waited, patient, like a doctor listening to symptoms. Arun forced himself to continue. He's the reason my father drinks. He dragged my father away when my mother needed him. He did something to me. Arun's throat tightened, and he refused to break. I want him to suffer. I want him to die. The room seemed to inhale. Ajahn didn't flinch. He didn't judge. He simply asked, "Do you have money?" Arun stared. How much? 5,000 baht. Arun almost laughed. For Arun's family, 5,000 baht was not a fee. It was a season of food. I don't have it, he said. Ajahn nodded. Then I don't work. Arun's nails dug into his palms. There has to be another way. Ajahn leaned forward. There is. Silence stretched. Ajahn smile returned, thin and certain. Become my student. Arun hesitated for one heartbeat, then another. The grief in him outweighed everything else. Fine, Arun said. Ajahn rose smoothly. Good. He called softly, and the young man went to fetch things from the altar. A tray appeared holding flowers, incense, candles, betel nut, and small folded leaves inscribed with inked symbols. Arun recognized some of it from temple offerings, but here, the objects felt hungry, as if they wanted to be used for something the Buddha wouldn't bless. Ajahn had Arun kneel. Arun offered the tray. Ajahn accepted it with a nod, murmuring words Arun couldn't understand. The air seemed to tighten around the syllables. Then Ajahn began passing objects to Arun. One jar, then another, then a cloth bundle, then a small wooden mask wrapped in string. Arun took each one and placed it back carefully as instructed. It went on longer than Arun expected, until his arms ached. Ajahn finally said, "This line is old. 10 masters before me. I am the 11th. Arun, exhausted and desperate, said, "I can accept it." Ajahn gaze sharpened. "Can you?" He turned to the altar and lifted the folded cloth on the central platform. Underneath were 10 small dark relics, dry, shrunken, wrapped in thin thread with inked markings. Not fresh, not wet, but unmistakably human in their origin, preserved by time and something else. Arun's stomach lurched. Ajahn spoke calmly. "You don't inherit only my teachings. You inherit the weight of the masters who came before." Arun couldn't look away. "What are those?" "Remnants," Ajahn said. "Proof that their voices don't die." Arun's mouth tasted metallic. "No." Ajahn tone stayed gentle, but his eyes turned hard. "You agreed to enter. The door does not open both ways." Arun's skin prickled. The lamps seemed to dim. Ajahn gestured around the room. "Look," he said. Arun turned his head and felt the blood leave his face. The room was no longer empty. People stood in the corners, in the doorway, behind the altar, pale figures with wrong proportions, a woman with hair hanging like wet rope, a man with a missing hand, a child with a face that seemed half erased. Their eyes were fixed on Arun, not curious, not angry, hungry. Arun's breath hitched. "What is this?" Ajahn whispered, as if explaining a recipe. "The things that follow power, the things that follow pain. You have called them without knowing it." Arun tried to stand, but his knees felt weak. Ajahn voice dropped. "If you refuse now, they will not let you leave clean. You will stagger through life half-owned. You will never sleep. You will never eat without vomiting. You will rot while still breathing." Arun's vision blurred with panic. "And if I accept," he rasped. Ajahn smile returned. "Then you become the hand that holds the leash." Arun stared at the relics. His throat tightened with disgust. Then he pictured his mother's eyes in the coffin. He pictured his uncle's smirk. He pictured his father shrugging like a stone. Arun reached out with trembling fingers and did what Ajahn told him to do. He swallowed. The room seemed to exhale. The figures in the corners did not vanish, but their stance changed, subtly, like dogs acknowledging a new master. Ajahn laughed, a soft sound that made Arun's spine go cold. "Good," he said. "Now, tell me what you want." Arun's voice was low and shaking with hatred. "I want him broken." Ajahn called for something. An assistant brought a large square of stiff leather, thick and dark. Ajahn placed it on the floor like a mat. "Hold it," Ajahn said. "And remember." Arun's hands pressed into the leather. He closed his eyes. He remembered the blow to the head, the waking nightmare, the threat, the helplessness. His hatred rose so fast it felt like dizziness. "Enough," Ajahn murmured. "Place it down." Arun set the leather on the floor. It moved. At first he thought his vision was playing tricks. But no, the leather curled at its edges like something breathing. It rolled inward, folding itself tighter and tighter until it became a compact bundle no bigger than a fist. Arun stumbled back. What? Ajaranthe's voice was a blade wrapped in silk. Go, he said, addressing the air. Something red and dark slid out of the shadow behind Arun. For an instant, Arun saw a woman's outline, but wrong, blurred, as if made of smoke, stained with dried blood. It picked up the leather bundle and vanished. Ajaranthe turned to Arun. 3 days, he said. Then you can visit him. Arun's mouth was dry. How will this work? Ajaranthe spoke like a man describing weather patterns. The bundle returns to its original size inside him. It steals his space. He will swell. He will stink. He will feel full and starving at the same time. Arun's hands shook. Will he die? Ajaranthe nodded once. If nothing is done, yes. Arun should have felt fear. Instead, he felt a sick kind of relief. 3 days later, Arun walked to his uncle's house with his heart pounding. He expected a fight. He expected the machete, the threats, the smugness. What he found made his stomach twist. The smell hit him first, a thick rot that clung to his clothes. Inside, his uncle lay on a mat, skin sweaty, belly distended unnaturally. His eyes were glassy. His lips were cracked. The man who had held a weapon on Arun now looked like a broken animal. When he saw Arun, his mouth worked slowly. Help, he whispered. Please. Arun stared at him. For a moment, Arun's mind flashed to his mother's face. Her eyes opened, demanding something the living couldn't give. Arun turned and ran. He ran all the way back to Ajaranthe's house, breath tearing, and told him what he'd seen. Ajaranthe nodded as if hearing a report from the market. He will be dead by night, he said. That evening, the village whispered the news. Arun's uncle had died suddenly, violently, in his own filth. People spoke of bad luck, of illness, of punishment. Some said he deserved it. Some said no one deserved it. Arun lay awake listening to his own heartbeat, feeling nothing like victory, and everything like a door closing behind him. After that, Arun stayed. He became Ajaranthe's student. He learned to draw symbols that were not Buddhist. He learned to read candle flame and water surface for answers. He learned how people's desperation makes them pliable. He learned how fear opens wallets faster than hunger. People came to Arun for help, and sometimes he helped them. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes they didn't ask to be healed at all. Ajaranthe never blinked at those requests. He simply watched Arun and said, "Decide what kind of hand you are." Arun told himself he wouldn't go as far as Ajaranthe. He told himself he would not become cruel. But power doesn't arrive as a sudden transformation. It arrives as a series of small permissions. One day Ajaranthe said, "If you want a true guardian, you need a spirit that matches your shape." How? Arun asked. Ajaranthe looked toward the jars lined up behind him. You find broken deaths, he said softly. Deaths with injustice. You collect their traces. You bring them here. We call. We see what answers. Arun's stomach nodded. That's... Ajaranthe's eyes sharpened. You already swallowed the line, he said. Don't pretend you're still clean. Arun didn't want to do it. Then he remembered his mother's eyes. He began collecting what Ajaranthe demanded, not in the grotesque way villagers whispered about, but in ways that still made him feel like he was stepping over a boundary. Ash from forgotten pyres, soil from accidents, shards from broken shrines, hair from the dead when it could be obtained without violence, remnants offered by desperate families who didn't ask too many questions. It was never enough. Then the sea gave him abundance. A coastal disaster struck. Boats overturned, water swallowed streets. Bodies came back in pieces, and names blurred into lists. Rescue workers moved like ghosts among the ruins. Arun arrived without telling anyone where he was going. To this day, no one knows how he got access to places he shouldn't have been. He returned weeks later with his face older and his eyes emptier. He brought offerings sealed in cloth and wax, and Ajaranthe received them without comment, like a man accepting groceries. The ritual that followed was quiet. No thunder, no fireworks, just candles, murmured words, and the feeling of something unseen settling into the house like a new tenant. Afterward, Ajaranthe said, "Only one stayed." "What do you mean?" Arun asked. "The others went," Ajaranthe said. "This one remained. It chose you." Arun didn't see it at first. Then at night he began noticing a presence at the edge of lamplight, an outline like smoke, dark red in tone, shifting as if uncertain which shake to wear. Sometimes it looked like a woman, sometimes it looked like nothing at all, just pressure in the air. Ajarnte called it by a name that meant red shade. Arun began calling it the red shadow. With the red shadow near, Arun's rituals became stronger. People came, they begged, they paid, they promised. Arun never again needed to wonder if Ajarnte's work was real. It was real enough to ruin lives. Years passed. Arun grew skilled. Ajarnte grew quieter. Eventually, the older man sat and watched, while Arun did most of the work. The student became the blade. The master became the hand that pointed. Arun told himself he was still in control. Then one night, Ajarnte said, "All your suffering had a cause." Arun's jaw clenched. "Don't." Ajarnte's voice was calm. "Ask your red shadow," he said. "Ask who struck you from behind that evening. Ask how you ended up in that house." Arun's stomach tightened. "I know." Ajarnte shook his head slowly. "You know the story you tell yourself," he said. That night, Arun lit a candle and sat alone. Ajarnte was elsewhere, sleeping or pretending to. The assistants were gone. The stilt house creaked softly with the wind. Arun whispered into the dark. "Red shadow," he said. The air shifted. The candle flame leaned sideways as if listening. Arun swallowed. "Show me what happened," he said. That evening, the blow, the waking, the truth. A sound filled his ears, an intense ringing, like a bell struck inside his skull. He squeezed his eyes shut, and images flooded in, brutal and clear. A figure behind him on the path, older, familiar, hands that didn't hesitate. A wooden club lifted and swung. Arun's father. Arun's breath caught. The vision continued. His father dragging Arun's limp body, not with panic but with purpose, toward his uncle's house. His father speaking to the uncle in a low voice, like negotiating a trade. A bottle of liquor exchanged hands. Arun's father gesturing toward Arun, as if toward livestock. And then words that made Arun's blood turn to ice. "Do what you want. Then finish it. I'm tired of feeding him." The vision snapped away. Arun gasped, clutching his own throat. The candle flame steadied. The red shadow hovered in the corner like a stain in the air. Arun sat shaking, understanding crashing into him, like a wave. His uncle had been a monster, but his father had been the hand that opened the door. Arun stumbled to his feet. He didn't sleep. By dawn he stood before Ajarnte with eyes that looked like cracked glass. Ajarnte studied him. "Now you understand," the older man said softly. Arun's voice was hoarse. "Why?" Ajarnte's expression didn't change. "People do ugly things for small reasons," he said, "especially when they're weak." Arun left without another word. He walked all the way back to his childhood home. His father lay on a mat, hungover, mouth sour, eyes swollen. When he saw Arun, he blinked, as if confused by time. "What are you doing here?" he mumbled. Arun stared at him. He thought about the years of his mother's bruises, the shrug at her death, the coldness at Arun's confession. The club lifted in the dusk. Arun's hands were steady now. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply whispered a command into the air beside him. The red shadow stirred. That night, Arun's father screamed. Neighbors heard. No one intervened. In villages, people learn when to pretend they didn't. 2 days later, Arun returned. His father lay on the mat, eyes frantic, face soaked with sweat. He clawed weakly at his own belly, as if trying to remove something that wasn't there. "Help me," he begged when he saw Arun. "Take me to the doctor." Arun watched him with a strange emptiness, as if grief had finally burned itself out. He leaned closer and said the words his father had spoken after Arun's mother died, slowly, clearly tasting each syllable. "Even if I'm here," Arun said, "I can't help you." Arun added, "If you die, then you die." Then he turned and walked away. His father died that night. Arun didn't perform prayers. He didn't hold a funeral. He told someone to bury the body cheaply and quickly, like disposing of unwanted waste. When Arun returned to Ajarnte's stilt house, something in him had shifted permanently. After that, Arun stopped pretending he was different from the people who came begging for harm. He began doing whatever was requested. Love bindings, separations, curses, intimidation, ruin. People paid him, sometimes with money, sometimes with favors, sometimes with secrets. At night, Arun fed the red shadow with offerings that made the candle flames tremble. And Ajarnte sat behind him, smiling faintly as if watching a tree grow exactly the way he'd planned. Years passed again. One day supplies ran low. Materials that took time to gather, the kind you couldn't buy at a market, were gone. Arun, now the main worker of the house, went to Ajarnte and said, We need more. Ajante's face brightened oddly. Good, he said. Good, good. Arun frowned. What? Ajante pointed toward a storage room behind the altar. I prepared things long ago, he said. Go. Take what you need. Arun stepped into the storage room and stared at rows of jars and bottles. He didn't know which ones Ajante meant, so he began opening them. Most held dried herbs, some held ash, some held string bundles tied with knots. Then Arun opened a sealed jar and froze. Inside were remnants he recognized, not because they were grotesque, but because he had handled them himself years ago. Traces from the disaster, ashes he'd collected, tokens he'd delivered, pieces meant to anchor the red shadow. Arun's hands shook as he counted. The set was intact, complete, unused. Arun's mouth went dry. If these were still here, then what had he been feeding? What had he been commanding? Where had the red shadow come from? He kept searching, breath shallow. Behind a clay doll with a stretched mouth and bulging eyes, he found a folded paper pinned under its base. He pulled it free and unfolded it. A name was written there. A birth date. A village. Arun's spine went cold. It was his mother's name. His hands trembled so hard the paper rattled. He grabbed the doll and moved it aside, searching underneath, and found more folded papers, more names, more dates, but his mother's was at the top like the beginning of a list. Arun stumbled out of the storage room and into the main living space, clutching the paper like evidence in a trial. Ajante sat in his usual spot, looking calm. Arun's voice cracked. What is this? Ajante's smile widened slowly, like dawn creeping over a field. You finally opened the right jar, he said. Arun's eyes burned. You did it, he whispered. You made her sick. Ajante didn't deny it. He didn't defend himself. He simply said, you would never have returned to me without a wound deep enough. Arun shook with rage. You ruined my life. Ajante tilted his head. No, he said, I shaped it. Arun's voice turned raw. So you sacrificed my mother? Ajante nodded once, almost reverent. You made merit at the temple. I made merit for my work. Arun's vision blurred. He could barely breathe. Ajante leaned back, satisfied. Do what you want, he said lightly. Curse me, kill me, destroy me. Arun's hands rose instinctively, as if to call the red shadow. Ajante's smile sharpened. But remember, he said softly, you are already the next one. Arun screamed. It wasn't a dramatic scream. It wasn't performative. It was the sound of a man realizing he had been trapped for years, and the trap had always been his own pain. He stormed out of the stilt house and didn't stop running until his lungs burned and his throat was raw. A week later, a rumor spread. Ajante was dead. They said he had taken his own life. Arun didn't believe in guilt anymore. When Arun returned to the stilt house, the assistants were gone. The altar was intact, candles unlit, the air stale. Ajante's body had already been removed, but something new sat on the central platform, a folded cloth, placed carefully like an offering. Arun approached with dread and lifted the cloth. Inside lay a small preserved relic, marked with inked symbols, fresh enough that Arun's stomach turned. Ajante's final gift. Arun remembered the initiation years ago, the swallowing, the hunger in the corners. He remembered Ajante's voice saying there was a way to control what lived inside you. Arun understood what Ajante had done. Even in death, Ajante wanted to make sure Arun could not escape the line. Arun stood staring at the relic, his breath shallow. The red shadow hovered at the edge of the room, watching. Arun realized then that he had no clear proof of what the red shadow truly was. Was it a spirit from the disaster? Was it something Ajante had kept hidden and simply handed him like a leash? Or, Arun's eyes drifted to the paper with his mother's name, still clenched in his fist. Or was it her? Not her in any clean, comforting way. Not the mother who cooked and soothed and lied to protect him, but her grief, her open eyes in the coffin, her unfinished anger, shaped into something that could bite. Arun's knees weakened. He wanted to destroy everything. He wanted to burn the house down and drown the altar in holy water and run until his feet fell apart. But he knew a darker truth. Even if he ran, the line was inside him. Years later, Arun lay in a hospital bed, thin enough that his bones showed through his skin. Doctors used words like late stage and metastasis and palliative. Words that meant the same thing no matter the language. The door was closing. He couldn't keep food down. His throat rejected everything. His body emptied itself until there was almost nothing left. A man visited him, a stranger with tired eyes, someone who had once come to the Stilt house for answers and now came for closure. Arun spoke to him quietly, voice like sandpaper, and told him everything. The temple, the Stilt house, the initiation, the red shadow, the revenge, the father, the papers. Ajarnthe's smile. When Arun finished, the visitor sat frozen, as if the story had wrapped around his ribs. Finally, the visitor asked, "Who is the red shadow?" Arun didn't answer. He turned his head slightly toward the corner of the hospital room. The fluorescent light flickered. For just a second, the corner looked darker than it should have been, like a stain that didn't belong to this world. Arun's lips parted, but no words came. His eyes, exhausted and hollow, held a kind of resigned terror. Then he looked away, as if refusing to give a name to something that would only grow stronger when spoken. 2 days later, Arun died. The nurses said it was peaceful, but the visitor, who had sat by the bed late into the night, swore that just before Arun's last breath, the room smelled faintly of candle wax and cemetery smoke, and the corner of the ceiling seemed to ripple, like something unseen was shifting its weight, waiting for the next person with enough pain to swallow it. If you felt that chill in the corner of the room, you're not alone. If you enjoyed this story, tap like, subscribe to WHISPERLOOP, and turn on notifications. New horror stories drop regularly. And tell me in the comments, who do you think the red shadow really was? Until next time, don't look too long at the dark parts of the room.